It's absolutely crazy to me that the biggest scene in Challengers, the one that's been in all the marketing material, the one that's been in every article about the movie, isn't actually in the script. And having read the script, there's a whole bunch of things that were on the page that ended up being changed slightly on screen. I think you can learn so much by looking at what changed and trying to figure out why they did it. So spoiler warning, I'm going to talk about the entire movie and I'm going to walk through some of the changes that I found most interesting. So the first one is the sequence whenever Patrick is at the motel and his car declines and he has no money, and like the whole point of the sequence is to show that like Patrick is so broke that he can't even afford a place to stay. And in the script right after that sequence, he drives to McDonald's and he orders something off the dollar menu, and the whole point is again to show he's so broke that he can barely afford anything to eat. And that's a tiny little sequence, it's only a few lines in the script, but I think it was really smart that they cut that. Because when it comes to filming something like that, that takes a lot of time. They're gonna have to work out a location, they're gonna have to do multiple setups when they get there, all for a really small scene. It's a lot of effort for not very much gain. So in the final film, they cut that out and they actually merged that idea into the registration sequence. So whenever Patrick turns up to register for the tennis tournament, he walks in and the lady has a sandwich sitting at her desk and he's just staring at it because he's so hungry he's had nothing to eat. One, that's just a funnier way to show it. Two, it's a more efficient way to show it because they're not having to go to another location. They're putting that idea into a scene that they're already filming. But thirdly, because it really reinforces the whole point of that registration scene. Because everything about that registration scene is about giving Patrick a choice. It's a choice between dropping out early to collect the money that he desperately needs, or playing on and being broke and starving for a chance to get that title. The fact that like at the start of the scene he's so broke and so starving that he's literally taking someone else's sandwich makes that decision to play in the game so much more compelling. Like in that moment, choosing to go for the top spot is not the rational decision in any way. He desperately needs the money, but the fact he doesn't do that tells us so much about his character right at the beginning, and it's a really smart change for the movie. Another scene that really jumped out at me was during the scene whenever Patrick is swiping through Tinder on his phone in the locker room, and in the script he's just swiping through Tinder and that's really it. But in the movie he swipes through about 4 women and then it stops on a man. And it's in that moment you realise that, oh, Patrick is bi. And the whole thing of Patrick being attracted to men isn't really a thing in the script, but it's a really big part of the movie. Because the whole thing of the movie is this love triangle between Tashi, Art, and Patrick. And you've seen loads of movies where it's 2 guys going after the same girl, but it's so much more interesting whenever there's that unrequited love aspect of it between Patrick and Art. It just makes the whole thing so much more interesting when the movie plays with the idea that Patrick would maybe be with Art if Art felt the same way. And I really like how the Tinder sequence is used to communicate that, because you already get that sort of information anyway from the way Patrick interacts with Art, but it's the way they make it so explicitly clear here in a way that's so efficient. They don't have to say anything, you get the message just by showing it. The biggest change is the whole threesome scene, which isn't in the script at all, and that's so interesting considering how much of a part that's played in the marketing and how much of the discussion around the film has related to that scene and how central the scene is to the entire movie. Apparently it was when Luca Guadagnino came on board, he felt that all corners of the love triangle should touch in a really physical way, and it's really fascinating because that whole sequence feels like the core of the movie. Obviously the whole film is about the intersection of these 3 people and their relationship with each other, so the fact that they have a really visual way that overlaps really works. But it's also one of those things where if you read the script and you hadn't seen the film and you didn't know about that, you wouldn't read it and go, you know what this thing really needs? You know what really needs added to the script? But once you've seen the film, you couldn't take it out and see it working the same way. And again, it works because it's not just doing it for shock value, it's summarizing the entire movie. What's also interesting about that scene specifically, when you look at the context of the whole script and the entire movie, there were very few scenes that were added to the film and very few scenes that were cut out of the script. There's a lot of dialogue changes, but structurally, pretty much every scene that's in the script is on screen. So it just makes it even more fascinating that that was the thing that was added. There's another really interesting difference between the script and the finished product when it comes to the churro scene, because in the script the whole thing starts with Patrick asking Art if he's seeing any girls at Stanford or what he's doing, and then Art asks Patrick if he's seeing anyone when he's out on tour on tennis, and he's like, I'm a taken man, I'm with Tashi. And in the script it feels a little bit more innocent because Patrick started the conversation, but in the finished film the whole sequence starts with Art asking Patrick if he's seeing any girls on tour, and the whole backhanded thing about it all is he's trying to basically sabotage Patrick's relationship with Tashi. Again, in the script, because Patrick starts the conversation, it makes the whole thing seem more innocent when Art starts questioning Patrick, because Patrick was the one that brought it up. But in the finished film, having it start with Art makes it feel so much more sinister. And ultimately, that is what Art is trying to do. He's trying to weasel his way in between Patrick and Tashi, and having the movie scene focus on just that and showing that more sinister side, I think ends up being more effective. There's one line in the script that feels really on the nose. It's during the fight sequence between Patrick and Tashi in her dorm room, and at the end of it he finishes by saying, break a leg, and obviously she goes on to break her leg. And I'm sort of 2 minds about it, because one, there's something that feels deeply unfair about the fact that he says break your leg and then she goes on to do it, and I think having that in the script makes it feel more clear that he's partly responsible for her being off her game that day and breaking her leg. There's just a really cruel irony to him saying it and then it happening. But it also just feels a little bit on the nose. Like, it could happen in real life and it would be fine, but whenever it happens in a movie, it just feels a little bit scripted and a little too good to be true. I think it could have worked either way, but it's interesting that they changed it. One of the biggest differences between the script and the final film is during the sequence whenever Patrick meets Tashi in the bar in 2011. It's when Art is coming out of like a conference or something, and he spots them in the bar, and then he gets distracted because someone asks him to sign his hat, and he has to sign his hat, and he looks back and they're gone. In the script, that conversation between Tashi and Patrick goes on for a really long time, and there's some really nice dialogue in it. But again, in the script, and it's a thing I found a lot when reading the script, is there's a lot of dialogue where the characters are more explicitly saying what they're feeling, and they verbalize it a lot more. And I think in the film, they cut a lot of that way down. A lot of it becomes far more unspoken, and they're communicating a lot of it with just looks. I think less ends up being more in those instances. What's also really interesting is that in the scripted version, Art is upstairs in his hotel room asleep. He's not present at all, so there's no chance for him to see them or catch them. And it's a really tiny change in the finished film, but I think that moment of Art seeing them together and the three of them all overlapping in the same room again is a really smart choice. Again, the movie isn't about Patrick and Tashi, or Art and Tashi, or even Patrick and Art. It's about all three of them together, and I like the way the movie finds ways to have them all overlap because it's about all three of them. I saw a review that criticized this, but in the day before the final match, there's a whole storm and there's a whole sequence where there's Patrick and Tashi driving in the car and everything's just flying everywhere because of the storm. And obviously the whole thing is because they're going through turbulent time in the movie, so the outside world and weather is reflecting the turbulence. And I really like it when movies do that, when the weather reflects how the characters are feeling. I get why some people don't like it and it feels a bit cheesy and cliched, but it works for me. That's something that's only in the movie. There's no weather or storm or anything in the script. The final big change is at the very end of the movie. Again, everything in the script and the film is pretty much the same at the end, up to the final moment whenever Art and Patrick hug. And again, this is crazy to me that this wasn't in the script because it just feels like such a perfect ending. And I guess it kind of makes sense because the whole thing of Art and Patrick hugging at the end and Tashi watching feels really similar to the hotel room sequence where they're kissing and she's just watching the both of them. And having that close out the movie makes it feel like their relationship is resolved in a really satisfying way. And it's seeing stuff like that that makes reading scripts feel so valuable because you could see how in the hands of a completely different director, that ending would feel completely different. But it's also really interesting to see how a writer develops their own work as well. Like if I had read the script for Challengers without having seen the movie first, I don't think I would have read it and said, oh, this needs this and needs this. Like it already works so well on the page as a piece of writing, which makes it even cooler to see the ways that it has changed and you see just how smart writer Justin Christkus is. He was able to work through the entire rehearsal period with the actors and be on set, and apparently that's really quite rare for writers, which is insane because that's obviously going to make the movie better. I had a really great time watching this movie, I had a really great time reading the script, and I cannot wait to see the next film from Justin Christkus, which is being directed by Luca Guadagnino, so hopefully it's just as good as Challengers. If you like this, you should like and subscribe, and you should watch the other stuff I've done. Watch this one. Watch this video.